Welcome to Mishna study Masechet Terumot, Perek Aleph Mishnah Het. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to discuss if someone wants to go ahead and separate oil, right, to cover, for his crushed olives, right? So he's in the middle of crushing olives, making oil out of them. He's, let me give, some terumah to cover these crushed olives. I'm going to separate oil and give the oil to the Kohen. Is that allowed or not? And similarly with grapes and wine, right? You have grapes. He's stepping on it. In the actual vat, right? He's crushing these grapes, turning them into wine, and during this process, he's like, hey, you know what? Let me separate wine, and I'll cover the grapes. I want to cover these grapes that I'm, that are pressed, that are crushed, right? So we're going to discuss, is a person allowed to do that, and what the ramifications are if he does. So en tormim, you're not allowed to separate terumah, shemen al zatim nechdashim, velo yain al anavim nizachot. You're not allowed to separate oil to cover crushed olives, and you're not allowed to separate wine to cover pressed grapes. Ve'im taram terumah ve'achzor ve'yitrom. If you did separate, right? So you didn't listen, you separated it, you weren't supposed to. It's considered terumah, right? Because midoraita, it should count. Ve'achzor ve'yitrom, but he needs to go ahead and re-separate again another terumah, right? We'll see which one's more important. Harishona, the first one that he separated, midamat bifnei atzma. That's midamat. Midamat is a term, dimua, we'll see it come up, if it's a mixture of terumah, right? So let's say one fell into another 99, so it ends up being 1 in 100. That's a problem. Like we have the concepts of batil b'shishim, right? When it comes to terumah, it's 1 in 100 it needs to be. So if it's less than 1 in 100, right? One that only fell into another 99, that's midamat, right? It's a safek terumah, and we need to go ahead. You don't have to give it to the Kohen, but you have to sell it to a Kohen, right? You're not obligated to give the whole thing away, but at the same time, no one else is allowed to eat that, right? That mixture. So it needs to be given to a Kohen or sold to a Kohen. And which one is it? Is it the first terumah that you separate or the second terumah? So it's the first terumah that you separated because that's the real one. That's the more important one, right? The second one that you did was really only midrabanan, and therefore only the first one is midamat. Let's say someone eats it by mistake, right? Someone in general, someone eats terumah b'shgaga, we know they need to actually pay back the terumah plus an additional fifth, right? A homesh. So which one? If you eat the first one, right? The first terumah that you separated, you're going to be obligated to the homesh, avalu hashaniyah, not the second one, right? And the second one, you're not obligated to pay for homesh, and it's not midamat, as we explained, right? The reason for this is because the first one, right? You're not supposed to separate. Why you're not supposed to separate? We'll see in next Mishnah. Rambam is going to explain, because it's something that's not a finished product, and because it's not a finished product, you can't separate a finished product for an unfinished product. You can't separate oil for crushed olives.